Україні!
Героям слава!
Glory to Ukraine!
Glory to the heroes!
Glory to Ukraine! Glory to the heroes! Glory to Ukraine! Glory to the heroes! Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to remind you that war in Ukraine is not over. The bloody war which starts Russian Federation, the bloody Russian Nazi, is not over. Ukrainian people dying every day under the Russian shelling. The oil and gas that government around the world still buying from Russia is paying death of Ukrainian peaceful people. We are here to demand the help, to demand the support for Ukraine, because Ukraine is a peaceful country and we don't deserve to be killed by Russian occupants. It's not the end conflict, it is the occupation of sovereign country on the middle of Europe. The bloody Russian Nazi doing genocide of one of biggest nation in the Europe. The bloody Russian Nazi trying to invade one of biggest country on the center of the Europe. The bloody Russian Nazi killing Ukrainian children. They raping Ukrainian women. They robbing our houses. They kidnap our children. They making genocide of Ukrainians. And we're here, ladies and gentlemen, to remind you that such a things can't be happen in 21st century on the middle of Europe. And we all together in unity need to stand against the bloody Russian Nazi. We need to fight with Russian Nazi as our ancestors fight with German Nazi years ago. Ukrainians are fighting for freedom. Ukrainians are fighting for our homes. Ukrainians are right, we are on our land. We are fighting with occupants. It's the same enemy we have with Armenian, with the Syrian, with the half of Africa. The bloody Russian Nazi doing it. This is the way how Russian lives. They come into the neighbors, they making war, they shooting. This is what Russian doing. It's the same scenario in Armenia, in Georgia, in Belarus, in Moldova, in Ukraine now. Thank you. All the good people should keep together, should stand together now to fight with the one enemy of the world, with the new Nazi. This is Russian Federation. Russian Federation with the bloody dictator Putin. The Putin is a criminal. Putin is a criminal and the Russia is a terrorist state. I want you to remember this. When you will buy Russian goods, when you will drink Russian vodka, or when you will look Russian ballet. The Russian vodka is with the blood Ukrainian children. The Russian ballet is not clear white. The Russian ballet is on Ukrainian blood. All the Russian culture, they said, it's a fake, it's a lie. The Russian culture is to come to the neighbors and kill them. The Russian culture is to come to the neighbors and rob them. The Russian culture is come to neighbors, kill you, rape your wife, and kidnap your children. This is what Russian culture is. World, support Ukraine. 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 World, support Ukraine! World, support Ukraine! World, support Ukraine! World, support Ukraine! World, support Ukraine!
World support Ukraine!
World, support Ukraine!
World support Ukraine!
World, support Ukraine!
World support Ukraine!
World, support Ukraine!
World support Ukraine! World support Ukraine!
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Ukraine needs your support because the Russia is huge. In Russia lives around 140 billions of brainwashed people. All the Russians are support that invasion. All the Russians carry responsibility for this war. All the Russians are happy that Russia stole our Crimea. All the Russians like Putin. All the Russians hate you, ladies and gentlemen. They hate America. They hate Great Britain. They hate Europe. They hate freedom. No one of Russia doesn't believe in freedom at all. If you speak with a Russian and saying we are free people, Ukrainians are free people, and we want to be free, Russian laugh. Russian saying the freedom does not exist at all. And they bring that things to our land with the rockets, with the missiles, with the weapon. The Russians just shooting civilian infrastructure. Yesterday, they shoot Chernihiv. They shoot theater on the center of peaceful city Chernihiv, where wasn't any military target. And it's every day is example when Russian killing Ukrainian civilian people with the huge missiles. They launch them tens or hundreds and nobody knows where they're flying to. Nobody knows where the rockets gonna land. They bombing residential house on the middle of night. The mothers dying, hugging their children, and the destroying on the ruins of their home. That's a clearly terrorism. The Russia is a terrorist state. I want you to remember this. The Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Ladies and gentlemen, the war in Ukraine is not over. And it's very far from the end. This war continues almost 10 years. Almost 10 years on the middle of Europe, the bloody Russian Nazi making genocide of Ukrainian nation. In 1994, when Ukraine gave up our nuclear weapon, the world, United States, Great Britain, and Russia as well, it's funny but it is, they promised to protect us in case invasion, in case some danger action. And now Russia trying to invade us, and all the world react too slow. Every day of this war cost Ukrainians hundreds of lives. Hundreds of lives, the peaceful, great people, the talented people, young children, which could grow up in the peace, which could learn new knowledge, which could live and share our culture with you, ladies and gentlemen. Travel, just live and love. But Russia decided Ukrainians not deserve to exist. Russia decided that Ukrainian nation does not exist, that Ukraine should lose the sovereignty, that Ukraine should be invaded, and that Ukraine is Russia. But Ukraine is more than 40 million people. It's one of the greatest country in Europe, one of the biggest country in Europe. Ukrainians are the same as you are. Ukrainians are the same as people in any continent in Africa, Asia, America. Ukrainian children want to live. Ukrainian children want to go to school. Ukrainian family want to love each other and just live. And that's why we're fighting. That's why we will fight. And that's why we will win. We will win anyway, the bloody Russian Nazi. We will beat them. We will throw them away abroad. And we will kill every occupant who came to our land. We have a right to do this. And we will do this. Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine.
Stand with Ukraine! Stand with Ukraine! Stand with Ukraine! Stand with Ukraine!
Stand with Ukraine.
Stand with Ukraine!
Stand with Ukraine.
Stand with Ukraine! Stand with Ukraine!
Ladies and gentlemen, this is terrible war in Ukraine going right now. The bloody Russian occupants trying to invade Ukraine. This is the war with occupation. This is the war with the Russian coming and occupying our cities. They killing all pro-Ukrainian people. They torturing people. They robbing houses. And Ukrainians are fighting very brave with them. But Ukraine needs more weapons to be able to defend our freedom. Ukrainians are fighting for freedom. It's as simple as it is. We are fighting for life. We are fighting for our homes, for our families. And I call you to support Ukraine. Make a picture of Ukrainian flag right now, today. Share it in your Facebook, in your social media. Say stop the war.
It's got some face.
Let Ukraine live.
Okay, maybe here.
Putin is a criminal.
Okay then.
And we, all Ukrainians we want to stop the war. We want to liberate our homes. We want to liberate our land. That's only one way to stop the bloody Russian Nazi. Thank you, bro. It's only one way to beat them. It can't be any negotiations with the Russians because Russians are terrorists. And as we know from films, Hollywood films, and declarations of all the governments, there cannot be any negotiations with terrorists. No negotiations with the Russians because Ukrainians know very well. Russia can promise you anything and next day they stab you into your back. They break any promise they give and they start doing same things again. The Russians are liars. Russia is a state of liar. All their history built on the lie. All their politics built on the lie. When the Russians come, there is no human right. There is no election, referendums or stuff like that. No human rights, no freedom, there is torching, there is blood, there is tear. With the Russian comings, people die. And that's why Ukraine will fight till the victory. And that's why we're gonna win. And one more reason why we're gonna win, because all the free world helping us. We feel that help. We know it. We say big thank you for everybody who at least one time prayed for Ukraine. For all the governments who sending us the weapon. But it's not enough. It's more than 10 years we are able to hold them. But they so many and they doing the same stuff. They killing Ukrainians. Thank you. They killing Ukrainians. It is not any politic stuff, any like thought way how to live. It's just murders. The Russians just murdering. They just killing. That's what Ukraine against. We don't want to die. Do we have right to fight against the Russians? I think we are. We have right. And we will fight. We will fight with the bloody Russian Nazi. And thank you all the world for helping us. Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine.
Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine.
Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine. Stand with Ukraine. Here to remind you, the terrible war in Ukraine is not over. And Ukrainians are fighting with the bloody Russian Nazi. And we will fight and we will win. And we have right to kill any bloody Russian who came to our land with a weapon. And we will do that. Because they don't understand. They don't understand that we are a separate country. They don't believe we exist. They are sure that Ukraine is their land. And if Ukraine war under the Russia 400 years, it doesn't mean that Ukraine is Russia. 30 last years, Ukraine live with Russia as a good neighbors. We forgive them all the terrible things which Russia does before, in the Second World War, in the First World War, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 400 years ago. We didn't remind them. We didn't ask them to pay back, to kneel before us, to say sorry. 30 years we trade with them. They came to us. We Ukrainian people went to Russia, worked there. We didn't give for Russia any reason to be aggressive to us. Opposite, Russia say all the time, we are brothers nations, we are their brothers, and what they do, they steal in our land, they steal in our lives, they killing us. The Russians just killing Ukrainians with no reason. And as soon you understand it, ladies and gentlemen, and all the people around the world, the war will be finished. We need to put pressure on Russia as much as is possible. We need to put pressure on the bloody Nazi country, terrorist country. And we need to stop this war. It's very easy for Russians to stop this war. They just need to get away from our land, come back to their homes and grow up their own children. If Ukraine will give up, we will die. As simple as it is. If we give up, we will die. We will be sent to Siberia, Our family will be separated, our children will be kidnapped and sent into Russia. Our books will be burned, our theaters will work on Russian language, our teachers. It's terrible things when Russia coming, Russia killing. That's why Ukrainians doesn't want to give up. And we will not give up. We will fight with the Russians because they are not so scary as you, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Western countries thinking. They are nobody, they are just many. They are not organized, they are not motivated. All the weapon of Russian Federation that's from Soviet Union times, from 70s, from 80s, it's old, it's rubbish, it's rusted, but it's still killing Ukrainian people now. We demand support Ukraine. We're not asking to help us. We demand it because it was promised. It was promised to protect Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, the war in Ukraine is not over. And it's a terrible war. You can see this. You can see here on our posters how Ukrainian cities looks after the Russians came there. You can open internet and Google Mariupol, Bucha, Zaporizhia, Dnipro, any city of Ukraine. Google it and look how it looks when Russian coming. Thank you. When the Russians coming, they just destroying cities. It's 100 of cities and villages. Героям слава. 100 of cities are wiped out. That's what Russia bringing. And we will fight with Russians. And we will win. And after we win, ladies and gentlemen, I invited you to Ukraine to see how beautiful our country is, how peaceful our people are, what is Ukrainian hospitality, what is Ukrainian food, Ukrainian drinks, Ukrainian nature. Now in London, around the world in general, it's a millions of Ukrainian refugees. You can meet them where you're working in the public transport. They carry blue and yellow flags on the chest or on the backs. Stop, speak with them. Speak with Ukrainians and ask how they feeling, why they came here, why they don't want to die there in Ukraine. There is so many Ukrainians here because the Russians killing them. Russians killing them in their homes. Russian killings Ukrainians in their beds on the middle of the night. It is the worst thing on the world. This is the worst what the country can be behaving. This is the Nazi. This is the racism. This is the homophobic. The Russia is the evil in our world, and our planet is too small. We are too educated. We have access to information too easy to not see this. Everybody who thinks he or she is the good, free people, you can't sleep well till the war in Ukraine is not over. Everybody who cares about global warming should care about war in Ukraine. Everybody who cares about rights of different people, you should care about war in Ukraine. Everybody who cares about nature, animals, you should care about war in Ukraine. Because the thing what Russia doing in Ukraine right now didn't happen long time in the world. And now they are Nazi. They are Nazi. Well, I don't know. Ask all the people, ask your grandparents what Nazi is. Now the Nazism raised the head in the Russia. Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a 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 terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава! Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть москалям!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
My friends, thank you very much for coming here today. We all know it very well that to be here, to have our voices heard by the whole world is not a chore, it's not work. It is a privilege. It is an ability that not everybody in this world has. A lot of people would wish to have the opportunity to have their voices heard, but they cannot because they're not in the position to have it as such. But we can speak for Ukraine. We can explain and we can inform people about every single thing that's going on in Ukraine and about every single terrible crime committed against the Ukrainian people by the Russian terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Stop Russia, stop the war.
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 More sanctions on Russia.
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 So let's not forget, my friends, our protests happen every Wednesday at 6 o'clock, every Saturday at 4 o'clock, and every Sunday at 3 o'clock, always in 10 Downing Street. Come and show your support. Our group is Support Ukraine Group in London on Instagram. So please check it out. Please come to our protests. Every single little bit counts. But now we need to inform people about some news that has happened not long ago. First things first, the US has now given their agreement on providing Ukraine with F-15s. 16s, thank you. F-16s.
F-16.
It's about time, to be honest. It's about time. It's about time. But we are very grateful for this decision. It should have happened sooner, but no problem. Happening now is what matters, because now the Ukrainians can finally get ready to do a proper counteroffensive. Doing a counteroffensive, or any offensive for that matter, without air support, without air superiority, is in most cases foolish, in most cases impossible. And yet, some individuals expect Ukraine to do this counteroffensive without the proper support, without the proper armaments. Ukrainians are not going to be sent to their deaths. We are not the Russian army. We are not the Russian military. The Russian military sends meat waves forward. The Ukrainians do it more cleverly. The Ukrainians waste the enemy's troops whilst using up their ammunition. That is why the Ukrainians need more ammunition. That is why the Ukrainians need more support. That is why the Ukrainian military needs more armaments. Because the Ukrainians are not using their troops as a resource. They're using their ammunition as a resource. We need to remember this, so that we know how to move forward in this situation. But that's not the only piece of good news that we've had. Apparently, the Russian rocket that was supposed to be collecting samples from the moon has crashed on the moon. Now this suggests one of two things. Either somebody has dropped a cigarette on the rocket, as the Russians have claimed many times in the past about their Moskva battleship, and every single time something bad happens, it's somebody dropping a cigarette. It's not the Ukrainians, no, it's the Russians dropping cigarettes, yes. Or, alternatively, it could be that the Russians have finally decided to defend the minority of Russian speakers on the moon, and have decided to do their special military operation on the moon now, and have started by shelling the moon with the first rocket. Now, my friends, I do joke about this situation because it is kind of funny, but at the same time, it is terrifying that some people still don't see reality as what it is. The Russians would much rather waste billions on sending a failed drone that ends up crashing and getting destroyed on the moon than to provide a better quality of life for their own people. The Russians would much rather invest money into their military, although most of their money goes into the pockets of the command and control structure, as the corruption in Russia suggests. And of course on alcoholism of individuals such as Medvedev. You know, Medvedev is a particularly interesting character who's been saying that the EU, NATO, and all of these organizations will collapse any day now, and then we will see the rise of the Fourth Reich. This is what Medvedev has been saying. This individual has been the president of Russia for a whole term, mind you. Of course, he was nothing more but a seat heater for Putin. He was just warming up the seat for Putin during the time he was in office. But still, the fact remains, he was a president of Russia. This is a respected individual in Russia. And these are the kinds of things that he says, with a straight face, mind you. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But of course, jokes aside, we have a serious matter at hand. And just because we have some good news today does not mean that we should stop supporting Ukraine. In fact, it means the opposite. We need to strike the iron while it's hot. We need to end this situation as soon as we can. We need to provide Ukraine with everything that Ukraine needs to finally end this war, to finally bring this war to an end, not for a day, not for 10, not for a year, but forever. Because as we all know, Russia has betrayed the peace agreements made in the past, not only before the beginning of this war, but also during the war itself. Both the Minsk agreements have been violated by the Russian military. The second one, in particular, was a comedic situation indeed, because the Russians held advantage in one of the positions on the battlefield, and so they broke the agreement right after it was made, just so they could close an encirclement of a small group of Ukrainian troops. That is how petty the Russians are. That is how little they consider their agreements. The smallest advantage that the Russian terrorist state might get out of something, they will break every agreement they need to achieve that advantage. That is a psychopathic country, my friends. We cannot deal with a country like that. We cannot trust the words of a country like that. All of these supposed voices for peace, or as what they are in reality, apologists and Russophiles, all of them, they're deluded or they are shills for the Muscovite regime. We need to see reality as what it is. The Russians have broken their agreements in the past. The Russians have invaded Georgia, the same as they've been invading Ukraine. Except in Ukraine, they faced even more opposition, bigger country, bigger military. And now, at last, the world is starting to wake up. But Why not sooner? Why not act now in strength? Because strength is the only thing that the terrorist Russian regime understands. Strength is the only thing that's preventing them from going any further in their genocidal conquests. Strength is the only thing that's preventing them from using their nuclear weapons. Some Russophiles and apologists claim that if we send more weapons to Ukraine, then that will provoke Russia to use nuclear weapons. My friends, that is not how it works. Russia has attacked Ukraine, not when Ukraine was strong, but when Ukraine was weak. Russia will attack the West if it senses weakness. It will attack if it senses there will be no consequence for that attack. The only thing that has prevented the Russians from using nuclear weapons up until now is the inevitable and immediate threat of retaliation from the West. That is the only thing that could ever prevent the Russians from using nuclear weapons. Peace? What peace could there be when they continue their advance? What peace could there be when they will break their agreements in a year, when they've rebuilt their military, and go for another try against Ukraine? What peace could there be with the individuals who have sinned and who have committed crimes beyond comprehension, and who still with a straight face continue to defend the same exact excuses that have been disproven so many times in the past? Because of course, Prigozhin himself has admitted that every single excuse and every single objective of the Russians in this war has been a failure. Every single excuse was a lie. Every single objective has resulted in the opposite happening. They were speaking about defending the Russian speakers and the ethnic Russians when their rights were never attacked. Prigozhin himself said that this war was waged to enrich the Russian elites. That is the only reason why Russia has started this war. And of course, the usual excuses of the Russians, the Nazi claims, of course. The Russians, with the Wagner group, with many thousands of people who are neo-Nazis. The Wagner group that has been founded by a Nazi, by Dmitry Utkin, a famous neo-Nazi from the Russian Special Forces. And they claim that the Ukrainians are Nazis. Prigozhin said he was fighting the Ukrainians for more than a year. And they were still looking for these imaginary Nazis. That is how much we can trust the Russian terrorist regime. That is how much truth there is in their words. None. And we need to understand this, my friends. We can't live in the world we want to live in until we make it happen. We need to live in reality, not in what we want to be the truth. And then, when we understand that reality, we could potentially change it for better.
Yeah, so something you mentioned with Prigozhin. First of all, according to Putin though, this special military operation is still going to plan. Obviously, Prigozhin saying the whole thing has been a failure must be part of that plan. But idiots say also that Ukraine should also be neutral and demilitarized. That, of course, is completely unrealistic. As Pavlo has pointed out in the past several times, arms keep peace. One example of this is Switzerland. Even Switzerland, with its much more naturally, as beautiful as Ukraine is, it's not as naturally defensive as Switzerland, which is blessed with its mountains. Evidently, arms keep peace more than mountains. So it has a strong standing army. It was also lucky enough not to share a long border with a country intent on its destruction. No, neutrality is completely unrealistic option. Only NATO membership and more armaments in order to achieve the long overdue victory. I'm telling you this, you know. But also whilst I'm here, just a daily reminder for those of you who are yesterday, but also for any newcomers today, a reminder again not to buy any products from Unilever. That's it. I'm not going to give their products free advertising, but you can look for yourself on these products and not buy them and tell people you know, friends and loved ones, not to buy their products. There's in a way, as Taras once pointed out earlier in the speech, that Russian vodka is awash with blood. In a way, they are even worse. They're still trading with them. So all their food products, all their cleaning products, they make a lot of products, are awash with blood as well. And lastly, yes, it is a welcome development. Hopefully, the sooner the F-16s arrive, the better. This will provide better air superiority, better ability to counterattack, and possibly, hopefully, with these F-16s, even better.
Air defense for Ukraine! Air defense for Ukraine!
Air defense for Ukraine!
Air defense for Ukraine!
Air defense for Ukraine!
Air defense for Ukraine!
Air defense for Ukraine! As long as they have a good point to give. But of course, as we've seen before in the red cap boy yesterday, some individuals unfortunately don't have a point to give. He came here shouting, I support Russia, and we asked him, why do you support Russia?
Are we on?
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is Red Cap Boy, an infamous individual from Speaker's Corner with infamously mental issues, and he's here trying to destabilize the protest, refusing to step from underneath this property here, this little shade we got here, and refusing to go on a debate. He doesn't want to debate. He wants to shout. Let's see what he has to say. All right, Red Cap Boy, are we going to debate? Are we going to shout? What do you prefer?
What about Zelensky?
Hold on, stop.
Zelensky wants to fund the war.
Wait.
Zelensky wants to fund the war.
Buddy.
What do you think about
What's your point?
Zelensky?
What's your point? What's your point?
He's a
Name your point.
degenerate. He will destroy Ukraine.
Why is he a degenerate?
He wants to fund the
Why is he a
war for
degenerate?
Can you move out?
What OnlyFans? Zelensky doesn't have OnlyFans.
No. He says that Ukrainians should be on OnlyFans to earn money.
Zelensky doesn't
to earn
have
money for the
OnlyFans.
war.
What are you talking about?
He said that the Ukrainians should be on OnlyFans to earn money for the war.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
You shut up. Why are you
He is a weak little man.
Why are you getting in his face? Please, walk
Yes,
away.
he's a weak
Shut
man.
back up. Walk away.
Weak degenerate.
You're a coward.
Weak degenerate.
You're a coward.
Weak degenerate.
Such a coward.
So Ukrainian sympathizer, disgusting. Ukrainian sympathizer, degenerate. But it's degenerate.
You're a communist. You're a communist.
Communist, both
He
communists.
has mental issues. This guy has mental issues. All right. Right, Red Cap Boy.
I
Walk
want
away.
to save Ukraine
Let's go.
from Zelensky.
Let's
That's
go.
the real
Let's
danger.
go.
Anyway,
Chico.
as we can see, there were many invitations to engage in a debate, but those invitations were unfortunately denied. Now, do we have the sound system? We do. Time to start our protest.
Okay.
He just kept shouting the same thing. He couldn't say anything. He started saying that Zelensky has an OnlyFans page and Ukraine has an OnlyFans page. I asked him, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And he couldn't answer. You were looking at his face. I was looking at his face. I just simply could not understand what was going on in this individual's head. It was complete chaos. This is what the Russian propaganda does. It scrambles your brain. It really does. It really does. So we must be careful, and we have to, although some individuals are rude to us, we should still keep a good demeanor towards them. Because these individuals, most of them, they have mental issues. We have to have some mercy on them. We have to have consideration for their issues. Thank you very much. But we need to understand that their ideologies are flawed, and we need to oppose them as much as we can.
Слава Україні! Слава Україні! Glory to Ukraine! Glory to the heroes! Glory to Ukraine! Glory to the heroes! I would like to say sorry for English-speaking people because I would like to make like a little bit speech in Ukrainian language. That's why I apologize for your for Ukrainian language and thank you for your support. Дорогі українці, хто знає, яка з перших зі слов'янських держав, як трохи про історію поговорити, яка з перших зі слов'янських держав створила державу на території слов'ян? Якщо всі думають, що це була Русь, це неправда. Якщо всі думають, що це була Велика Моравія, також неправда. Це була Прест, не буду брехати, але це були Словаки. Правда, держава проіснувала всього лише 30 років, не змогли просто знайти наслідника і перейшла ця могуть до Великої Моравії, або по-чеськи кажуть, це Великоморавська Чечня. І
Моравію позвали Кирила і Методія, щоб нам дали письмо. І це письмо не було ні в Києві, нам давали, ні в Чехії, а в місті, яке було головним містом Великої Моравії, був Краков. До 9 століття, коли мадяри переходили через Русь, їм дозволили перейти цілим військом. І вони шукали, де б могли жити. Зі северу ляхістан Казимір І напала на Велику Моравію, і вони завоювали ці території. І Моравія воювала дуже довго про своє існування. І оці всі території, які живе Венгерія, це була Великоморавська Ріша, була Велика Моравія. Про що я хочу про це говорити? Моравія до сих пір існує в Чеській Республіці, якщо ви подасте, там є такий регіон, який називається Моравія. Я ніколи не знав, чому вони так говорять. Бо в Чехах кажуть подісти, ну як українська, а в Моравії кажуть йом, спійом, вони мають цей свій діалект. І про що я хотів сказати? От коли ці всі землі були завойовані мадярами, щоб мадяри жили, ті жили приїхали через всю Україну, там 500 000 чи 1 мільйон, щоб всі мадяри там заселилися, і всі ці слав'янські народи виїхали з цих земель. Вони там і жили. Але вони перестали говорити своєю рідною мовою, а почали говорити моравською мовою. І ці всі племена, які на тій території жили, вони зникли. Їх просто немає. Тому, коли говорять, що мадяри вони перейшли з Афіни, в їхніх генах є більше половини, це є слав'янські гени. Так, у них є менше ці гени славянізму, як в Україні, але як етнос тих народів, які жили на тих територіях, вони зникли, бо немає мови їхньої. Тому якщо хтось говорить, що мова це не важливо, і що можна говорити і французьку, і китайську, так, але вдома треба говорити своєю мовою. І про що я хотів ще сказати про таку річ, що коли приходять, от я був в Дніпрі, і там військовий каже, я не хочу говорити російською мовою принципово. Я йому кажу, так ти не говориш, що ти українець, що ти росіянин. Каже, нічого в тому поганого немає, ти русський. І він не міг нічого сказати. Каже, ну що ж тебе робить українці? Я йому говорю, що немає мови, немає нації, немає етнічної групи. І тому не треба соромитися, треба навпаки переламувати. І треба старшим людям показувати приклад молодим, що треба переходити. Бо якщо старші люди не перейдуть на цю мову, як молоді будуть? Моя бабця говорила так, мій дід говорив. А я пам'ятаю, як моя бабця мені говорить, я коли була мала в Вінниці, кажуть, і раніше всі переходили на російську мову. І от моя бабця перейшла на російську мову, коли була молода. І моя мама говорила російською мовою, я говорив російською мовою, але я усвідомив, що я українець, я переламав себе говорити українською мовою. І тому я вчуся приклад від інших народів, які захистили себе, як, наприклад, Чехія захистила себе на кінці 18-го, початку 19 століття, бо Карл Великий і Чарльз Вацлав Корнік, вони хотіли чехів германізувати. Тому чехи говорили німецьку мову, як ми говоримо з російською. І називається це в Чехах, називається чеське обнарозення, українське відродження. І вони, письменники, всі примушували говорити чехів чеською мовою, бо немає Чехії, немає мови, немає Чехії. Тоді би Гітлер завойовував Чехію, він би не завойовував Чехію, він би завойовував свій народ, бо вони всі говорили німецькою мовою. Тому мова – це є основне, що у нас є. Без мови це немає нації, немає культури, це просто якісь спогади, колись щось було. І до чого я так хвилююся, щоб у нас всі, і Дніпро, і Запоріжжя, і, я думаю, Харків вже переходить на Українську, Одесу також там. Прошу?
Харків прийшов, Харків стоїть і каже, слава Україні!
Але мені головне, що в Харків перейшов. Я знаю, Одеса перейшла, Запоріжжя, але все одно є такі люди.
Харків – це Україна!
Я знаю, але я був сам російськомовний. Тому я хочу, щоб ми знали, що ми не перший народ, який це проходить. Ми не є останній народ, який це проходить. Є були чехи, і вони перейшли. Є багато письменників, я можу розказати, які примушували чехів говорити чеською мовою. І в Чехах був такий закон, навіть чех, який пише красний твори високої якості, але німецькою мовою, вони від нього відрікалися. Вони не казали, що він чех, вони казали, що він німець. бо він пише німецькою мовою. Оце я чому це знаю, бо я ходив вчора в чеську школу, і я здавав з чеської мови і з чеської культури спити. Тому я знаю, що у них це вчать в школі, що де немає мови, немає вчителів. І так само і в нас. Я знаю, що це ми заплатили дуже велику кров'ю для те, щоб дуже багатьом людям зрозуміли, що без мови це немає. І мені боляче ходити по цій кладбищі, коли я був, я не можу тримати. У мене трусить, коли я чую російську мову, коли приходжу і дивлюся на прапорах, коли був на кладбищі, дивлюся на стільки прапорів, у мене серце болить. І тому я би хотів просто, щоб ми стали хвилину, помовчали за наших героїв і дали їм шину пам'ять від нас. Якщо можна, будь ласка, постійно хвилину.
Дякую вам. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
It is very important for every Ukrainian to speak Ukrainian, for every Ukrainian person to know the Ukrainian language. But my friends, we are abroad now, and to be understood by the whole world, we need to give our message for everybody, not just for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainian people know what's going on in Ukraine. The only ones who might not know are either the ones that are being brainwashed by the Russians, or the ones who do not want to know, the ones who are closing their own eyes and ears and are refusing to listen. There are such people in every country, in every place in the world. However, the Ukrainian people is more united than ever before. And now is our moment. Now is the moment for Ukraine to move forward. Now is the moment for Ukraine to become better. Better than it was in the past. Better than could ever be in the past. Better than the Russians expect us to be in the future. That is the best part of our history. I usually say the best part of Ukrainian history is yet in the future. But that time will only come to pass if every single one of us do what we have to do our part for that betterment to come. And thus, when we are abroad, we need to give our message for everybody else in the language of the country where we are speaking. It is very important. But still, I thank you very much for every single person who comes here to give us their mind, a piece of their own mind, in whatever language they choose to speak. And yet, my friends, it is very important to always remember, for the better future of Ukraine, for us to be ready to communicate with the rest of the world, and for us to be ready to rebuild Ukraine. Oh, we have a little bee here flying around. Speaking of rebuilding, these individuals, the bees, they never ask for a pay rise. They always work at their maximum. And in the end, they prosper. And the Ukrainians will prosper too. The Ukrainians will prosper because the Ukrainians have no choice but to prosper. That is the only way for us to move forward. But before that prosperity, before that peace and rebuilding is achieved, we have a war that has been enforced on Ukraine, that Ukrainian people have been forced to endure at the hands of the Russian terrorist state. And this war will not end until Russia relents from their current occupied territories in Ukraine. And for them to relent, we need to give a message to the whole world that Ukraine will receive its support not one day and not two and not 10. Ukraine will receive the support it's getting for as long as it takes for Ukraine to win. That is the message that we have for everybody in the world. That is the message that we have for Russia. For the Russian people who are being fooled by their leadership, who are being told that if they just endure a little bit longer, everything will be the same as it was. It won't. Things have changed forever. And nobody can bring back the past. As much as the happy grandpa Putin might want to bring the past to the present, it is an impossibility. We need to understand this. And we need to always keep moving forward. Putin says the collapse of the Soviet Union has been the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century. That is what regressivism is. He's planning to return back where the Russians were in the past. That is not good. Even if the past was great, it is pointless to try to return it, because the only place for us to go is the future. But the Russian past was not great. The Russian past was terrible and terrifying for every single country at their border, because they saw those countries as their possessions and the people as their slaves. It is as simple as that. A very simple way of seeing that the quality of life in Russia is no good is to simply look in Google Maps at their roads, at the pavemented roads in Russia. Even if we compare war-torn Ukraine and the closest region to Ukraine in Russia, we already see a huge difference in the amount of roads and pavement roads that are visible. What does this mean, my friends? It means that the Russians don't care about the benefit of the future. It means the Russians don't care about giving their people a better quality of life. The only thing they care is about increasing the power of the elites that live in the wealthy cities of Moscow and St. Petersburg. Because indeed, if you compare Moscow and St. Petersburg to Europe, you will not see much of a difference. They are wealthy cities, they are developed cities, they are rich cities. And yet, why is it that the rest of Russia has such a striking difference from the closest region of Europe to those regions in Russia? Because there is inequality. There is a terrible quality of life in Russia. And they are not keen on keeping it that way only. They're keen on spreading that inequality, spreading that misery to the whole world, not just to Russia, not just to Ukraine. The Wagner Group is in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. The Wagner Group is now destabilizing Sudan. We need to understand this. We need to understand that the Wagner Group is a terrorist organization, just like the Russian terrorist state. And they will not stop until their ambitions are crushed in Ukraine. That is the only way for us to move forward. That is the only way to achieve world peace. Because if we have the country with the most nuclear weapons in human history, oppressing the country that has given up the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world, the country that has given up its weapons in the biggest nuclear demilitarization in human history. If we have a situation like that happen now, what is preventing the countries with a single nuclear weapon from attacking a different country that doesn't have any? What is preventing them? Appeasement, appeals for peace. What will prevent them? Kind words will never do it. Kind words have never done it with Russia. They've never changed their atrocities in Ukraine. They've simply continued the same thing they've always been doing in Ukraine. They've continued to advance, continued to lie, and continued to kill anybody who opposes them. That is not a good country to move on to the future. That is not a good country to be your ally. My friends, the Russian claims that Ukraine is supposedly their sphere of influence, that they have the right to do what they please in Ukraine, is absolutely abhorrent. It is a medieval ideology, not even the previous century, perhaps even before that. Perhaps a caveman ideology would be closer to that. My friends, we cannot go back into the past. A modern-day witch hunt is happening in Ukraine right now, where the Russian terrorist state claims that they are de-Satanizing Ukraine. I am sorry, my friends, but only somebody with grievous mental issues believes in such ideas. I can't see that, I'm sorry. But we need to understand that just because we see reality as what it is, doesn't mean everybody in the world does. And that is why we must not remain silent. That is why we need to speak to everybody in the world and tell everybody what really is going on, so that every person on earth can make an informed decision based on this situation, based on the terrible situation that the Russians have put the people of Ukraine into. Because as we all know, all together we will win.
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 World, wake up!
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 More sanctions on Russia!
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 My friends, I know it very well that it can sometimes be daunting to speak to the people who need to hear our message. But we must not allow that fear to keep us silent, because the only way to make a change is to do something. If every person on earth would do the tiniest little bit to help end this war by helping Ukraine bring it to an end, bringing the war to an end not just for tomorrow or for a year, but forever, that it would become a reality. Those billions of small changes would make an enormous change in the grand scheme of things. But even if billions of people do nothing and simply silently think of their own ideas, that will change nothing. We need to understand that. And we need to act as much as we can. For that, I invite any of you who are willing to come with us after this protest to Speaker's Court. It is a very interesting place and a great place to train public speaking. For anybody who wants to see and hear what the opposition says, for anybody who wants to be ready when those points of the opposition come with me and we will be there, we will speak with them and we will face that opposition head on. Because that is what we need to do. We can't be cowering away from our opposition. Why would we cower away from people who have nothing but lies and deceit to back up their words? Why would we remain silent when we are telling people the truth and they are lying? Why would we do this? Why would we remain silent in these situations if we can speak to people, if we can disprove those lies, if we can give proof of the points that we are making? Many times we have seen these individuals, these Russophiles, come by us, shout a few words and flee before they can be held accountable for what they have said. I believe that if a person believes in something very strongly, they need to be able to justify that belief. They need to be able to explain it. They need to be able to give reasons for why they believe it. If they can't, that faith is hollow. It is unjustified. And that is why every single one of us needs to know why we stand here, needs to know what we will say to anybody who asks us to justify our actions and to justify the actions of Ukraine. We need to know it, so that in the right moment, we are ready. That is why we stand here. That is why standing here and speaking to all of you is a privilege. And thank you, every single one of you, for coming here and for showing your support for such an important issue as is the defense of Ukraine, the defense of the people who have sacrificed the most for world peace. And that is no empty boast, for as we know, the Ukrainians have given up the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world's biggest nuclear demilitarization, in the world's history. That must not be forgotten. And yet, sometimes our opposition forgets. So we need to remind them. Because that opposition is small in this country. In this country, people understand the plight of the Ukrainian people and the danger of allowing the Russians to do as they please. In this country, people are wiser than in some other countries. where people unfortunately have given in to the Russian propaganda. That is why we need to continue what we're doing. Although we have a lot of support here, our job is not done. Our job is never done until Ukraine gets its lands back, until Ukraine gets its reward for demilitarizing, for giving up its nuclear weapons. And before that happens, it will not be a good precedent. It will be a terrible precedent for the future if a country that gives up nuclear weapons is immediately attacked, immediately as they left themselves vulnerable, as they trusted in the international law, in the international agreements. What trust will there be in the United Nations and in those international agreements if the country who has given up all of its nuclear weapons gets attacked? What trust could there ever be? What hope of nuclear demilitarization for the planet could there be if Ukraine, the country who has given up the most, is the country that receives the least? It is impossible. We need to make that a possibility and then a certainty for Ukraine to get what it is owed from Russia and from all the other countries who have signed the Budapest Memorandum and who have promised to help Ukraine remain sovereign. Slava Ukraini! Slava nacії! Україна! 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 Героям України тричі! And now, my friends, we will have a short musical break. Where is Vlad? Vlad! Come here, man. Come here. Today is Vlad's birthday. Hey! Come here, come here, come here. Hey! This man is our runner. He runs all over London, bringing the Ukrainian flag to everybody around this city, showing the Ukrainian flag and his lovely smile here to everybody, and bringing the message to everybody who's there to hear it. Vlad, I would like you to say the usual Slava Ukraini stuff this time. Come on, man, let's do it.
Слава Україні! Слава нації! Україна! Україна! Захисникам наші тричі! Слава! 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 Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state! Thank you very much, Vlad. Thank you very much. I believe you're 22 today, correct?
Yes!
Yeah, 22. Oh, we got a gift. We got a gift. Look at that. Oh, watch it. Let the paper go away. You'll have to be the one to run after it, Vlad. You're the fastest one here. The best runner. Congratulations, Vlad. Congratulations. We must not forget, my friends, about our veterans here. You know, the veterans of these protests who come here the most often. To all of the people who always come here, you know, to Tommy, to Vlad here, and all the others, all of our friends here who come very often, to Aya, who's been playing her accordion for a very long time now. Every single one of you. To Jan, to Alison, to everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much for coming here. What you're doing is really making a change. And the change is what we need right now. Because without that change, we're going to remain in the same place as we are now. There is a saying that goes like this: if you are going through hell, don't stop. Why would you stop in hell? And right now, Ukraine is going through hell. But that is exactly why Ukraine must not stop. That is exactly why Ukraine must not remain the same. Ukraine will change. It will be better. It will rebuild. And it will become greater than anybody could ever imagine. And that is a reality that every single one of us is going to achieve. That is a reality in which every single one of us is going to have a small, medium, or great part. It doesn't matter which, as long as we all do our part. That is what really matters in these, our lovely protests, my friends. However, our opposition is still here. Over there, to be exact, some of them. Although they have removed their little placard that was saying "not our war," which, you know, honestly makes me happy, but probably, if I'm being completely honest, as Yura said it yesterday, they probably sold it to buy some beer. Yeah, they probably sold it to buy some beer. As Yura said, you know, I need to give him give him recognition for a good joke. You know, he did a good one last time. But we must understand this, that our opposition does not care how they look on camera. Our opposition does not care about how silly and how stupid the things they say are. The only thing they have going on in their head is somebody saying something I disagree with, I need to scream, I need to shout, I need to say what I have been told by my handlers, by the people who have brainwashed me. Of course, they don't see it that way. They see these brainwashers as the truth, as reality. Because again, unfortunately, many of these people have mental issues. And we should have pity on them. But just because we have pity on them doesn't mean that we cannot express how silly their opinions are. Because if such opinions remain unchallenged, then they will spread. As silly and stupid as an idea might be, if people keep spreading it unchallenged, that idea will catch on eventually. For example, the Russians have been using their propaganda machine to spread misinformation in Africa, to spread their and to hide their neo-colonialist desires in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Sudan, and in many other places. Lately in Niger, as we've said many times in the past. They have been spreading this misinformation because they want the African resources. The Wagner Group has been holding a monopoly on many of the resources in Sudan for a very long time, including their gold and oil. We must not forget about these things, because although such countries are far away, the world is closer than it has ever been before. The world is now bigger in terms of quantity, but smaller in terms of proximity. It is easier to go to the other side of the planet than it has ever been in the past. Now, more than ever before. And the world's economy is interconnected. That is why we cannot behave like Russia is behaving now. The way Russia is behaving now is that they can't supposedly survive without needing the rest of the world. They can't. Nobody can do it for long. Nobody can thrive when being by themselves. Humans are social beings, not solitary beings. And countries function in the same way. We need the resources, we need trade from places of the other side of the world. We need to have a good connection, good relation with the other peoples, with the other nations, with everybody. However, we need to understand when somebody hates us, when somebody wishes us harm. And that somebody is Russia. That somebody is the Iranian terrorist regime. That somebody is North Korea, Cuba, and a few other countries. I won't say many, because there are not many. But the few that exist are proof of the righteousness of the Ukrainian people. We do not want to be part of a country where criticizing your leader can land you in jail for 10 years. In case you're wondering, that country is Russia. We do not want to be part of a country where criticizing the leadership can land you in a penal battalion, getting thrown like meat at the enemies of that country, at the enemies that they have made, that they have attacked. In case you're still wondering, that country is also Russia. Russia does all of these things and more to their people, and they would do even worse to any country subservient to them in the future. They have done worse in the past. They have attempted to exterminate the Ukrainian people twice in 2 Holodomors during Soviet rule. And then, shock and awe, the Ukrainians suddenly don't want to be with the Soviet Union. How come? Then the Russians bring a different card to the table. They claim to be our brothers. Right after attacking us, right after bringing us great injury and harm, they claim that we are brothers and we cannot do anything to them because we are a brotherly people. Well, my friends, I guess the Russians never heard about the story of Cain and Abel. Because in this situation, that is exactly what we have. We have the Russians backstabbing Ukraine when we gave them nothing but peace agreements and good nature. We were trying to have trade, peace, and a better future with Russia as our friends, as our neighbors, but they refused. They refused friendship in order to make us subservient to them. They slapped our hand away and attacked us with a knife in our back. That is what the Russian terrorist regime has done. And everybody in the world needs to know this, so that nobody will commit the same mistake ever again. When Russia has invaded Georgia, unfortunately, many voices were claiming that Georgia provoked them. That Georgia was planning to invade Russia somehow, although Georgia is far smaller and has a far smaller military than Russia. Somehow we were supposed to believe that small little Georgia planned to take over Russia, because that is how ridiculous the Russian propaganda is. Those same voices are claiming that Ukraine has caused this situation. Those same voices are claiming that the solution is negotiation with Russia, that the solution is appeasement to Russia, that the solution is to give Russia what they want and they will stop. My friends, we need to think with our heads, not with our hearts. And honestly, in this specific situation, we need to think. We need to consider what has happened in the past so we don't repeat the same mistakes. Because Russia has been trusted in the past. We've had agreements with Russia in the past. They have been broken over and over and over and over again. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 3 times, and your name is Russia. It has been a situation that we've seen many times. And it is a situation that will keep repeating itself until we learn from it, until the world learns from it. Because the Ukrainians will not trust Russia. Ukrainians know that all the Russians are trying to do with this supposed conversation about peace is stall for time and reorganize their military and go for another try. We know it very well. But unfortunately, some people who have suffered less from Russia do not understand this. And that is why we need to speak to those people. We need to show them examples of what the Russians have done, and we need to send a clear message. If we are laid down, you will be next. If we are destroyed, Russia will come for you. Inevitably, eventually. Perhaps not tomorrow, not the day after, but soon enough. Once again, the Russians have troops in Moldova. The invasion force is already prepared. They already have some ground in there. All they have to do is to advance more troops and Moldova will fall. Moldova is a small country. It doesn't have the abilities that Ukraine had. It doesn't have the abilities that Ukraine has now. And that is why we must not allow this situation to continue the same way. We have to change the situation. We have to do what we can to change it. And the only way to change it is to stand together and support Ukraine. Fighter jets for Ukraine!
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 Air defense 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 for Ukraine!
Arm Ukraine as you promised!
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 Arms keep peace, as we have said many times in the past. Because the only way to stop yourself from being destroyed by malevolent forces, by psychopathic forces such as Russia, is to be able to defend yourself. We cannot be helpless. We cannot choose absolute peace at the sacrifice of security, at the sacrifice of accountability for the errors and for the crimes committed by others. And keep in mind that although some countries are committing a mistake by siding with Russia, the Russians are not committing a mistake by doing what they're doing. No, it is on purpose. They're doing this on purpose. They know what they're doing. The only mistakes they're committing are on the battlefield, where they are committing the stupidest mistakes ever. But this invasion has not been an accident. It has not been a mistake. It has been a premeditated crime that the Russians have been planning for a very long time now. And keep in mind that the Russians would have continued already if Ukraine fell. They were surprised at the resistance they received in Ukraine, because Ukrainians did not want to live as slaves. Ukrainians did not want to bring back the Soviet Union. But of course, the Russians did not care about what the Ukrainians wanted. They only cared about what their elites wanted, the Russian elites. When Ukraine became its own country, when Ukraine became independent from the Soviet Union, there has been a referendum done throughout the whole country. Every single region of Ukraine, besides Crimea, have voted more than 80% to join Ukraine, to be with Ukraine. That is not a close call. That is an overwhelming landslide result. If we account for some people who might not have voted, that is the vast majority of the people who have voted. And yet, Russia still claims as if the Ukrainians wanted them there. Crimea had a closer election. It only had slightly more than 50% voting to join Ukraine. And yet, they still voted to join Ukraine. The opinion and the feelings of the people living in Crimea have been violated by the Russian invasion in 2014. They did not ask anybody. They demanded. And they demanded only after they already had troops in Crimea. That is Russian diplomacy. That is what happens if we allow Russia to take initiative in this situation. They will take what they want and try to find an excuse for it later. That is the only way they do things. And we cannot negotiate with a country like that. Crimea needs to go back to Ukraine. Every single Russian-occupied region that the Russians have taken ever since the beginning of the war in 2014 needs to go back to Ukraine. That is our main condition, and that condition is unchangeable. And it will remain unchangeable until it's achieved. After it is achieved, then we could potentially negotiate with Russia. Then we will come to the table and speak. But first, we need to have what is ours. When a thief invades your home and blockades himself in one of your rooms, you don't start negotiating to give the thief your room for free. You call the police and get the thief out of there. Or better still, get him out of there yourself. However, in this situation, we are expected to believe in the opinions of some apologists and Russophiles, that we are simply supposed to allow things to be as such, and allow Russia to remain where they are now. Now, my friends, the only people who might think so are either those who blindly support Russia no matter what they do, or those who have been paying no attention whatsoever for the previous cases in Ukrainian and Russian history. And not only Ukrainian history, of Russian history, where the Russians have invaded with impunity many territories around the whole world and still keep them now. Even as part of modern day Russia, even in their official borders, there are some countries, some places, in fact many people who do not want to be a part of Russia, who never wanted to be part of Russia, and yet who were forced to be part of Russia. The Chechens come to mind immediately, as Grozny has been leveled by the Russian military in the two Chechen wars. That, mind you, the second one of those wars has been waged by Putin. It has been the beginning of Putin's career in politics, when he waged that second war and when he exterminated so many people in Grozny. After that, Georgia. After that, Crimea and Donbass. After that, of course, Belarus and Kazakhstan had their own attempts at doing a Maidan, their own attempts at liberating themselves from the Russian yoke. And that is why the Russians have advanced with their tanks and with their troops. Just like in the Soviet Union, nothing has changed. Their mentality has not changed. Their mentality remains the same. They will advance with tanks first, and then they will start trying to make some excuses for what they did, what they have done. And their misinformation is so cheap, and it's absolutely disgusting to hear what they say about the Ukrainians. These conspiracy theories that the Russians are spreading stem from the far right all the way to the far left, and even in other situations, even in other regards. They stem all over the place. They're all over the place. They appeal to the far right of the West and to the far left of the West. They call the Ukrainians Nazi, they call the Ukrainians Zionists, they call the Ukrainians Jews, they call the Ukrainians homosexuals. They call them everything they want to call them. You know, for some reason, for the Russians, to call somebody a homosexual is also an insult. For the Russians see it as such. That should say a lot about how the country is nowadays. And we need to be careful with that. We need to know what's going on. We need to understand that the Russians hate the West. The Russians hate Ukraine, and they hate everybody who is not them. It's as simple as that. Look at the Russian propaganda. Look at their state-owned TV. Look at what they write on their shells and on their tanks and on their planes. They write to Berlin, to London, to Washington. Is that a country that's planning to stop at Ukraine? No, my friends. That is a country who will go as far as it is allowed. That is why we need to do our best to make sure that Russia is not allowed to go any further. Slava Ukraini! Slava Nacії! Україна! 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 Героям України тричі! And now, my friends, we will hear the Ukrainian anthem. And everybody who wants to come to Speaker's Corner, come to me. We're going to go there in a bit. Thank you for coming, friends.
When are you going to join the front line?
Shut up, man! I'm asking him. Why are you asking
Palestine.
me
I mean, there must be somewhere you're
When are you
leaving.
going to join the front line? Yeah, you come over here and give it all
Do you know they serve pies in Israel? You might say.
So this individual here is Candyman.
Candyman.
From Speaker's Corner. You know, he's one of the characters here. He's been shilling for extremist Islam very often. But today he's here asking me, why am I not in Ukraine? Now, Candyman, let me answer
Yeah, you're the
your
age of
question.
fighting.
Let me answer your question.
Yeah, answer please.
I have had many veterans from Ukraine coming to me and thanking me for what I'm doing and doing speeches for the Ukrainian cause. They have said that it's very important for them to get the right equipment. And for them to get the right equipment, that is what we are doing. That is what we will do. We will make sure that
man.
Ukraine
Every
gets
day you're
the
getting
right
battered
equipment.
by the
Even
Russians.
battered.
Every
You'd
day
be
you're getting
eating him
battered.
if he was in batter.
Listen, no battered.
Eating him.
Battered,
Yeah,
you're getting
battered
beat.
like a sausage.
Listen, you're getting beaten up every day. You know?
He's not battered.
Nah, listen, man.
He's not
You
battered.
Western countries. Listen, man. You white Western countries.
You racist cunt.
Yeah, I am.
You racist cunt.
Listen, man. You
vile
are getting
racist.
abused.
I'm getting
and
abused.
used
By whom?
And exploited by the
whom?
West.
By the West.
Especially that guy.
How?
That guy. The
Absolutely. He's the exploiter. He's
No,
the big exploiter.
The West are exploiting
Give me
you.
an example of Western
West what?
exploitation.
West London.
You have to pay
One
for
example.
the weapons
One
that
example.
you bought from the West.
One example.
You think they give it to you for free?
But we need those
You're gonna
weapons
have
to fight
You're just
against the
jealous.
invasion.
You're not gonna win.
jealous.
No,
You don't know
I'm not
what's
gonna
going
win. You're not
Why do
gonna
you
win.
think so?
They will eat him.
Why do you
They will
think?
eat him, man.
Who's
I'll tell
gonna
you
eat
something.
me?
Russia. They will
Russia
eat
will eat
Ukraine.
me.
Well,
Are they
they're taking a
cannibals?
very long time,
They will
aren't
eat
they?
Ukraine.
Why?
Listen,
Why?
man. Let's have to
I'm
go to
waiting for proof.
Yeah,
I'm
like
waiting
that
for
3
evidence.
days war. That's how they're eating them.
Hey,
I'm waiting for evidence.
Eat 3 days. Taking
Listen,
a long
listen.
time.
You
isn't
know-
it?
I am waiting for evidence.
No answer. Mr. Hoodrich has
Hey,
no answer.
oxygen thief. Oxygen thief.
Sucking his
Shut
lolly.
up
Oh
for a
no, it's a
minute.
bait. It's a bait.
Listen,
Look like a lollipop.
Listen, when the
Look like a
Russian,
lollipop.
they were bombing.
Looks like a lollipop,
What did you
Mr.
ask?
Deliveroo.
Hey, guys, one discussion at a time.
Why are
One
you sucking
discussion
a
at a
lollipop?
time.
ask?
Why are you sucking a
Do you want to
lollipop?
suck that? Come on, I'm sure.
You're a
No, what is
lollipop.
that? It's just fit. Nothing more.
like
They
a
will
toy.
eat you. Russia
Looks
is
like
a
a
toy.
vibrator.
They will eat you
Why?
and they come to
Why do
the
you
West.
think so?
They will eat.
They will come
They
from
are
the
the
West.
right thing. They are the right.
No, they're not gonna come.
They are
They're
the
not
right.
gonna.
They
They
are
don't.
the
They
right.
don't. They
You
don't.
have
They
the
don't.
right.
That's a lie.
That's a lie.
Wait, shut up.
After Hitler's died,
Yeah.
Russia say Ukraine is like my God. No need to come next to me. And now Ukraine see, no, we need to be with NATO, be with Europe. They're not gonna let you be. Come on.
Hold on. No. Wait, Steve. Give me a second. Give me a
Smart,
second.
man.
Hold on. Where are you from?
I'm from Libya.
You're
From Earth.
Libya.
From Earth. From
Lovely,
Libya.
Lovely. If the French come back to Libya and say this is our land now, you're gonna have to shut up and listen to
we
them.
will kill
Is
him.
that so?
We will kill him.
Is that so?
We will kill him.
Ah, he's going to kill them.
You're stronger than France.
Yes,
think.
yes,
Your
yes.
military is
Yeah,
strong.
they push you. Because with us.
Exactly. So
Because
why
with
does
us.
France not come to you and not abuse you like Russia is abusing Ukraine?
Russia, they
Because
come and
France
they kick
is
Gaddafi.
not. Because I'll tell you why.
No, I will tell you. I will tell you
okay,
something
you tell me,
first.
you tell me.
England, America, all NATO, and France.
All the
they come
countries you
2011 in my country and they kill my fucking president.
Yet you're
What
here.
is that?
Killed your brothers.
No, they killed the president. They killed all of my people. There is a lot
they
of
killed
people.
all of your people.
15,000
preventing them
15,000 homes in half an hour.
Why
You're
are
not
you
going to see this in
complaining
BBC
about
because they're not speaking
Why
about that.
are you complaining about
Which
it?
of us
If
are
Russia
no,
is attacking
Let's
Ukraine
everyone.
and you're siding
Afghanistan, Iraq,
Heroin
Syria,
Thank you.
Libya,
And you
Yemen,
choose here.
every
And
single
you choose
country.
here.
We have
Why are
a
you
war.
complaining
No
about
one
it?
speak in the West.
Hold
But
on.
when Russia invade Ukraine, start everyone speaking. Why no one speak about Iraq? A million of people they killed in America
What about
and England
Russia and
in
Syria?
Iraq.
First things
What about
first.
Russia
You need to
bombing
have some
People,
manners.
your
I need to
people,
stop
they go to
spitting.
the Iraq with America.
First,
Your
you need
people,
to
they
have
go to
some
the
manners
Iraq.
and need to stop spitting.
Yeah.
Because you're spitting all over the
All
place.
right.
That's the first point.
All right.
Second point,
Yes,
war
second
in
point.
Iraq. First war in Iraq, the Iraq was in the wrong because it invaded Kuwait. Iraq was beaten back by the US because the US had a treaty with Kuwait. Second war of Iraq. Saddam Hussein had a war with Iran when he tried to invade Iran. Saddam Hussein had attacked the Saudis. Saddam Hussein had attacked Kuwait.
Is that your business?
Saddam Hussein
Is
was
that your
getting
business?
put
Is
down.
Ukraine your
Is that your
business?
business?
Is
Is that
Ukraine your
mouthing
business?
off
No,
about
it's not my
Ukraine
business. Okay?
So why are you talking?
No, I'm talking because
Why are you
now everyone is
talking?
speaking.
Why are you
Because
talking
everyone is
then?
speaking. So when
But you don't like people speaking about Ukraine. It makes you angry.
Yes.
What treaty?
Did Ukraine break a treaty with Russia?
No treaties were broken by Ukraine. Every treaty was broken by Russia.
The Minsk
Russia
agreement.
broke both the Minsk agreement.
Yeah, what
the second Minsk agreement. Hold on. So this guy says Ukraine broke the treaty.
NATO
I
in
tell
their
him,
borders.
no.
And you think
Thank
the
you,
Russian
Pavlo.
would just
Thank
sit
you.
down and
This individual says Ukraine broke the Minsk agreement. I tell him no, Russia broke the Minsk agreements. He answers, what do you expect? Of course Russia broke the Minsk agreements.
No, you did break it.
No, we didn't.
You did.
No, we didn't.
Because
The second
you showed
Minsk
interest
agreement
to join NATO.
Oh, hold on.
And
We
you're not
broke
allowed
the
to join
agreement
NATO.
by showing interest. If you were informed even a little bit, you would know that Ukraine showed interest before the Minsk agreements were signed, before the war even began. But you don't know this because you're uninformed. Let me inform you of something.
Can I say one word?
Go on.
You said Saddam Hussein he made a mistake invading Kuwait.
No mistake.
Please.
It wasn't a mistake. He did it on purpose.
Let me come to you. You talk. Let me talk.
Of course, make your point.
Okay. First about Kuwait, about Iran. First, you made a mistake. Sorry, probably misinformation. He invaded Iran with the support of America and Soviet Union first, from 1981 to 1989. And then after that, he invaded Kuwait.
So yeah? Support of US?
Yeah, no. So
I don't think so. He was
please,
support of
let me continue. I haven't finished.
No, but you need to.
I have no. You spoke. I heard you. You have to hear me.
But I'm asking you about your point.
You have to hear him, man.
You have to hear me. You have to hear me till the end.
Give him a second.
You have to hear me. Yes. Okay. Now the point is not about Saddam Hussein. He's dictator. Me, I hate Saddam Hussein. He killed his own people. He killed Kurdish. He killed Sunni. He killed Shia. He killed Christian. He supported civilian wars in Lebanon. He supported many criminals around the world. But you know what the point? No, look into my eyes. Because it's a respectful conversation. Look around.
I'm looking in your eyes.
No.
Lots of demands. I can't ask questions. I need to look in the eyes. I need to keep quiet and be steady.
Look around there. But the point is not about attacking Iraq, about attacking the regime. The point, even when they have Saddam Hussein down, they have been killing civilian people who they have nothing to do with the regime. Even the civilian people who they've been standing against Saddam, they have been killed by the NATO and others. Look, most of the people we do feel sorry for any person die in Ukraine, in Africa, in Palestine.
I don't feel sorry for any Ukrainian who dies.
No, I do feel. No.
Leave him. This guy's a waste. This guy's a waste.
But what he's trying to discuss, you have to understand his emotional approach. Because you feel like somebody killed my brother, why he doesn't speak? So you feel, are you better than me? It's not meaning you are better than me. But you are both of you sensitive ways because the NATO and others they are using the Ukrainian because it's a power between America and Russia. And many civilian people are dying in Ukraine. The war for a power is wrong. What you do as Ukrainian, you defend your land.
Thank you for your point of view.
You got my point? But Saddam Hussein, the idea about Saddam Hussein in Iraq is about the civilians who die over there. It's not about the regime. You got my point? So we have to look into eyes. And me, I totally understand because I'm Lebanese. And I know how the war does feel. And you must stand for your country, definitely. But when we want the support of everyone, you have to tell the others, yes, we do understand your point. Maybe in Europe they do all this claim, but we feel sorry for those people. We are not saying that. You have to blame the media, not to blame me as a Ukrainian, because I'm a victim like you.
Look, my friend, I thank you for having a good demeanor in the discussion. That's more than I can say about this individual.
Okay.
Definitely more than I can say about
no
him.
problem.
But let me tell you where I agree, where I disagree. I'm not speaking against the Iraqi people. I'm not speaking against.
He's not speaking about the Iraqi.
I'm not speaking about the people themselves.
This is the media. It's not his problem.
But listen. I'll tell you what I'm talking about. But Saddam Hussein, in the first Iraq war, he was to blame. Clearly, he invaded Kuwait.
I blame him.
He was clearly to blame.
I blame.
In the second Iraq war,
there is something you don't know. There is something. You are a very young man. I'm sure.
Don't you start with
no,
this, please.
But you don't know, please. But you don't know
so
how
can't
much.
Listen to him either. He's like my age.
Please. Go read from the history who was supporting Saddam Hussein with his war against Iran.
I know the Americans support
Second, you see, so he's a friend of.
Yeah, because everybody hated Iran in that point. Iran had a very revolutionary extremist idea of expanding to every monarchy in the Middle East. The Saudis, the Iraqis, everybody was terrified.
No, you know why? I will tell you why. I will light up more your eyes. I will tell you why. Because at that time it was two polars. It was a Soviet polars, a communism. It was a capitalism. So now, most even the Middle East is very important part of the war. With the natural resources and the control the resources culturally. So now, communism, they've been having their people from Middle East, and capitalism, they've been having their own people. Now, you created a regime that's different than capitalism and different than Soviets. So like this, you are emptying that part of the world from the people who are supporting here and there. That's why even the Soviets, during Iran and Iraq war, you know the wires, you put it on the borders, even the Soviet, they haven't given it to Iran, which is America supporting Saddam Hussein. So Soviets, they must support Iran. Even Soviets, they haven't supported Iran. Because it was Iran for them creation of this regime that will empty the
Iran
Middle
was a
East.
theocracy and the Soviet Union was against religion.
No, it's not about religion. It's not only about religion. Because you're creating some new ideas about it. But you understand me. No, but I'm explaining to you.
Let me give you my views and then we'll go back to Ukraine. Because we started with Ukraine. Because these individuals, you know, they need to be put in their place. They're coming here with their misinformation about Ukraine and we can't allow that.
I've been to Ukraine many times. It's very beautiful
This is
country,
complete
very nice
nonsense,
people,
especially with that individual.
By the way, I swear God, I don't hate Ukrainian people. But you need to drink from the same cup that you give it to us.
What cup?
No, not Ukrainian.
What cup did we give
to American?
Ukraine, they invade with America in Iraq.
Hold on.
They be in Iraq. I have a picture. Ukrainian army in Iraq.
Hold on. You have information about it.
Okay,
Excellent. Let's speak about Iraq for a second.
Okay, I have to go.
You know, no problem. It was a good conversation.
No, relax.
Now it's okay.
Do you know the amount of losses the Ukrainians have had in Iraq? How many?
I don't know. I know.
Why do you say that?
I know. Your people, they was in Iraq.
Yes, but how many losses were there? You don't know, do you? I'll tell you.
I don't care. Your people was there.
You should care because the amount of losses proves the Ukrainians were not part of any active operations in Iraq. The Ukrainians were doing humanitarian help
there is a
in
problem
Iraq.
between America and Iraq. That time you are not with NATO, not with America, not in like Europe, United
That's why Ukraine was not part of any active operations. It was doing humanitarian help.
So you go there. You
was
help.
doing humanitarian.
Did you help for right
You
thing?
understand what
Did you help for right thing?
humanitarian
Did you find the weapon?
understand
Did you
what
find the
humanitarian
weapon? The Americans say we're American.
My friend, do you understand what humanitarian help is?
It's a mistake to kill millions.
Hold on.
So it's like Hitler. He doesn't do mistake.
Wait. You haven't accepted the
Hitler?
point I'm making.
Do you like Hitler?
No.
Why?
You haven't
Because he killed a lot of
accepted the
people.
point
He
I'm
killed
making.
invaded
You're
all
skipping
Europe.
from one point to the other. You need to stick to one point. This is not a discussion. We're talking. You don't want to discuss. You want to fight. That's very true.
No, I'm not come to fight. I told you I don't hate Ukrainian people, but you need to drink from the same cup.
What same cup, man? The Ukrainians did nothing to the Iraqis. They were doing humanitarian help in Iraq. And you want to fight? 3 losses. And you're here claiming that the Ukrainians has got it coming. This is nonsense.
No,
you need to do some research.
There was in Iraq.
You need to do
and
some
invade them
research.
with America.
Look it up on Google. I beseech you to go to Google and look it up immediately or whenever you have the time. The operations, the active operations that Ukraine participated in Iraq, you won't find any. Because Ukraine was not part of any active military operation. They were part of one scouting operation, I believe. And then they did humanitarian help. That's it. You can't blame the Ukrainians from genociding the Iraqis. You can't. If you want to blame the Americans, fine, we can talk about that later. But you can't be putting the blame on the Ukrainians. They're blameless. You know what I mean? Now let's go back to Ukraine and about the war with Russia. The Russians have started this war by invading Ukraine in 2014. Okay, thank you for that. You admit that. I appreciate
Why
that
they
you're
start
telling the
that?
truth.
Why they start?
They started it because they felt like they could get away with it. They felt like NATO would give no consequence to Russia for the invasion of Ukraine. That's why they began. Why did the Russians advance again?
Of course NATO want to invade Russia.
NATO wanted to invade Russia. NATO
100%
offered
one
an
day.
opportunity for Russia to join NATO, an opportunity that the Russians considered. If I'm not mistaken, during Brezhnev, if I'm not mistaken. Alexei, come here, man, come here. You know, this individual is a very good person to have in this conversation because this individual is a Russian.
Where he come from?
He's Russian.
You're Russian?
He is Russian, yes. And he is... Looks can be deceiving. Looks can be deceiving.
Come close.
Looks can be deceiving.
FBC or FSB. That's all right.
FSB, yeah, FSB.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
He's a nice guy, you see. But look, the point is that the Russian government is not good for Russia. Russian government is not good for Ukraine. The Russian government is the enemy of these places.
And Zelensky is good for your country.
As well as mine enemy. You know what I mean? And I'll just finish this point and we'll move on. So Russia started this war because their elites wanted to be enriched at the cost of the Ukrainians. Instead of trying to improve the lives of the common Russians, they went for Ukraine and they attacked. Not because they were provoked, not because the Ukrainians did something to them. The Ukrainians gave up the third biggest nuclear arsenal in human history in exchange of a promise of peace with Russia.
Yeah, Russian history
Nothing
from
more.
The 1990s.
The Russians went there just because they felt that they could get away with it. The only reason.
Wagner is killing our people, Sudan.
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Wagner is killing our people.
You know why? That's a symptom of the.
But they're not helping you like they help the Ukrainian, isn't it? Because you're Muslim.
No, they are killing.
Because you're Muslim, they're not helping you.
Wagner
These people, the Ukrainian and the Russian and the American, they were bombing people in Syria. Yes?
The Russians.
Yes?
The Russians were bombing.
The Russians were bombing. The Ukrainians were bombing people in Syria.
They were helping the Syrian regime.
The Ukrainians were bombing people in Syria.
Yes. They sent weapons.
What are you talking about? The Russians were using chemical weapons in Syria. The Russians have leveled Aleppo to the ground.
And the
You
American,
need to understand
the
this.
American, the angels.
My friend, this is whataboutism. I'm telling you, the Russians did something bad. You're saying, oh, but what about the Americans? They did some bad things too. You can't do that. You need to face the accusation.
That Zelensky guy saying what's happening in Russia, in Syria is wrong.
Brother, I need to ask you a question. If you are condemning the Americans, why are you condoning the same actions being done by someone else? If the Americans are bad, and we agree the Americans are bad, why are the Russians doing exactly the same?
I don't want anyone to die. I don't want the West exploiting
A
this
while ago, he said that Ukrainians had what they deserve.
Yeah.
Now you say you don't
So
want
he's a
anyone to die.
hypocrite. Stands for nothing.
You change your opinion very quickly. A while ago, you said that the Ukrainians are getting what they deserve. You said you don't feel sorry for them. Now you say, yeah, again. And you're switching between 2 points. You're saying, I don't want anyone to die. And then you're saying, oh, the Ukrainians got what they deserve.
Because you guys are getting exploited by the West.
So we got what we deserve.
Yeah, because you're stupid.
I don't think you understand the meaning of that.
Brother, hang on.
Sit down and talk to the Russians.
Brother, hang
Yeah,
on.
sit
hang
down
on,
like before,
hang on.
sure.
So the Ukrainians are being exploited by the West. So what are the options? To just sit down and do nothing?
No, sit down and talk to them.
Why?
Give them promises that you're not going to join NATO, that you're not going to invite them to have bases over there, and encircle Russia.
Wasn't
because
Ukraine
that is a
rejected
declaration
by
of
NATO
war.
twice? Wasn't Ukraine rejected by NATO twice?
No,
Yes. Yeah, even Zelensky in the last visit to NATO, they never gave him a promise.
They're not going to give him. He can't join NATO because 10% of his land, more than 10% of his land, is occupied by a foreign power. He cannot join NATO while he's in war. Yeah, it needs to be peace.
Before the war. You're talking about currently. Before the war, NATO rejected Ukraine's application.
Yeah, because they're not up to standard, maybe.
So then what's the threat then? So what's the threat? If they're not up to standard, how do they threaten Russia? They're rejected and they're not up to snuff. So where's the threat?
A lot of people dying. Just because petrol is gold and that. So Ukraine, yes, of course.
Now you admitted a while ago you were disagreeing. Okay, so what's the reasons for Putin to attack Ukraine?
Because you were a puppet of CIA.
We were puppets of CIA. Okay, that's why Putin attacked Ukraine.
Britain and all NATO.
Right. What makes you think that?
Can you go he wanted the bombs. He wanted the atomic bombs to be close to the Russian border.
Is that why we gave up our nuclear bombs?
Why you don't have given up your nuclear bombs?
Do you realize that Ukraine gave up their nuclear arsenal?
They don't have that. They are Russian ones.
The Russian ones?
Yeah, it was
You sure of
what
that?
Ukraine have.
You sure of that? And Ukraine did not create any of those nuclear weapons in Ukraine?
Probably they were working with Russia.
Okay, probably working with Russia. So what makes Russia claim ownership of those nuclear weapons?
Because he is the master of you and master of all Ukrainians. Yeah.
Is he? And America is the master of the world, according to you, right? So why are you speaking against America? Look, you seem to switch between your being very subservient to Russia and being very opposing to the US. If the US truly does control the world, why are you not subservient to the US? Why are you subservient to Russia?
USA is no more controlling the world.
USA has no more control in the world.
There's China there.
A while ago you were saying the US was everywhere.
Middle East there.
Now you changed your mind again.
No. You must go to Russia and say, Putin, please, let us live.
Please, three please.
Let us live. Because I really...
Let us live? Live or leave? What do you mean?
Live, L-I-V-E.
Like living, being alive. Okay, we need to beg Putin to allow us to live.
Of course.
As a sovereign country, Ukraine needs to beg a different country to allow them to live. According to this individual.
You are a puppet of bloody USA. Do you think USA, they love you?
Do you understand what being a puppet means?
A puppet means...
Being a puppet means that you have to beg for your life.
They are begging now.
But you want us to beg of Russia. You want us to be a puppet of Russia. You claim Ukraine is a puppet of the US. You don't give any proof of Ukraine being a puppet of the US. And you say that Ukraine should be a puppet of Russia. So now we see it through your arguments here.
If he puppet of Russia is better than...
Oh, it's better. It's better. All we'll get is a third Holodomor. This time a success.
Can you zip your mouth?
Why? Am I making too much sense?
No, you don't make sense. You are
really?
Senseless.
Senseless.
Projection.
You sure of that?
I'm sure. We are people here, they pay all these taxes and all this money goes to bloody Ukraine. Your president every time...
All of this money, all the taxes go to Ukraine, all of them.
Please, help. When are you going to stop?
Hold on a second. You say Ukrainians are asking for money from the West, but you don't want that. You want Ukraine to beg Russia instead.
Oh yeah, if you want a peace...
What sense does that make?
You have to beg. You have the kiss of...
This individual has a lot of sexual innuendos in his speech.
Life is sex.
Oh, life is sex, okay.
He was sexy man, didn't he? He was on the
he's a sexy man. Now you like Putin, huh?
No,
I'm sure you do.
Your pictures beneath your pillow of Putin.
Well, I can see who really has the homosexual tendencies here.
No, really.
I mean, he's talking about it.
I want from you.
What do you want?
You have our sympathies and prayers.
Don't bring that.
He left. Go on.
That guy.
He ran. Is he what?
Is he normal?
Who? The bald guy?
Yeah,
No, he's not normal. But to be fair, you're not normal either, Stalin.
Why he is getting so angry so quickly?
Because he's not normal. He has mental issues.
Why do you bring him with you?
Who?
No,
I thought you were talking about Candyman. I thought you were talking about Candyman. Oh, you're talking about Tommy.
Elephant, is he?
You call him elephant? I think being Stalin is much worse than being an elephant. You know, elephants are lovely creatures.
Stalin made Russia to stand against the West. At that time, Russia, all the West was one side and Russia was one side. And even at that time, China wasn't helping Russia. Do you remember that?
Yeah, China had its own problems.
They have their own problems with North Korea or something like that.
Not quite, but...
Russia stand half of the world saved by Russia. Do you know that? Half of Europe. Yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
Are you aware that Russia in the beginning of the Second World War was allies with the Nazis?
It was. But
okay, so Russia saved the world. Thank you, Russia, for siding with the Nazis.
But the stupid Hitler attacked Russia. Otherwise, if they kept alliance,
so hold on a second. You want me to praise Russia, to praise the Soviet Union for fighting the Nazis when they started World War II on the same side as the Nazis? How does that work?
That's politics.
Oh, that's politics. Okay. Why should I praise the Soviet Union again? What's praiseworthy about the Soviet Union?
Because Soviet Union, in 10 years' time, with China, if they get together with everything, militarily, economically, politically, and everything, all USA kick it out. Yes. So you have to know
Interesting.
that.
Why did the Soviet Union lose the Cold War then?
It didn't lose the Cold War. It's because economic situation. Because that bloody man, what's his name? Gorbachev. The drunk man. What's his name?
Which one of them has so many drunk men in the Soviet Union?
Yes.
But he's Yeltsin. Yeah.
Are you Ukrainian?
What?
Are you Ukrainian?
She's not. Why?
I'm British. Can you not tell by my accent?
What does it matter if she's Ukrainian or not?
No, because I hate Ukrainians.
You see, Stalin, this is your problem. Stalin hated Ukrainians, and you are the manifestation of
Then why do you
Stalin's
keep
hatred
approaching him?
against the Ukrainians.
Why do you keep approaching him?
Because I want to destroy him.
He has a rage boner for me. He has a rage boner for me.
Do you have pictures of him underneath your pillow?
Don't ask questions you know the answer to.
No, I mean not physically.
I mean, you saw him over there and you ran to him. Are you in love
Yeah,
with him?
because I saw that bloody flag.
Oh.
See, we're just talking here with Stalin, about a few different things. Stalin, he's a funny guy. He's a funny guy. His points are trash, but he's a pretty funny guy. He's a CIA guy. Look at this big guy. He can beat you up. He can beat anyone. Look at him. He's here on vacation in the UK.
Vacation, it's a long vacation.
I know. I mean, your shirt claims that it's a
It's a CIA shirt. Yeah.
Anyway, Stalin, look. If you hate Ukraine, look within yourself for the origin of that hatred. To hate something without knowing why is very silly. You know what I mean?
I know why I hate Ukraine.
Why? You almost had a Freudian slip there.
No, don't be silly. I hate CIA. I hate Western Union.
But Ukraine is not CIA.
He's begging them to join the what you call.
He's asking
NATO.
for US help. He's asking to join NATO to defend himself against Russia.
Which is better, to beg Russian or to beg America?
We're not begging anyone. We're asking NATO, and we're asking the UK and the US to do what they have promised to do in the past. Hold on a second. Hold on.
You begging Pope to support.
Imagine this. We signed a contract, right? Me and you. We signed a contract that tomorrow you're going to come to the corner with this same shirt. I pay you £100. I pay you £100.
This is from Harrods.
Listen. I pay you £100 for that. We get a lawyer. We ratify the contract. Excellent. You come tomorrow in a red shirt, like a communist Stalin shirt, right? And I ask you, why did you not keep your word? We signed the contract. I paid you, and you say, "Oh, I don't have to keep any contract." What does that mean?
Who said that we don't have any?
My friend, a treaty needs to be kept. If it's not kept, you are seen as a lying dirtbag. It's as simple as that.
Why in 1994 when they have this agreement between what's it called?
What agreement?
You know, I don't know what agreement.
Which agreement are you talking about?
No, the one which is had a kind of truce between Ukraine and
the Minsk agreement. But the Minsk agreement was not done in that date. You're confused with the dates now.
Yeah,
the Minsk agreement. The Minsk agreement was only signed after the beginning of the war.
Because America told you to not sign.
The war began in 2014. No, Ukraine signed 2 Minsk agreements.
No,
Yes, they did.
No,
yes, we did.
Russia signed as well.
Yes, both of them signed, but Russia broke that agreement. And the second Minsk agreement was broken basically immediately after it was signed, because the Russians were almost making a surround on a bunch of Ukrainian troops.
Russia wanted to save Russia.
Save Russia from what?
From
the Ukrainians.
Like you.
From the Ukrainians.
No,
but the Ukrainians gave up their nuclear weapons.
Evils who was with the CIA.
Buddy, what is there to save Russia from? Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons.
But why didn't you apply the Minsk treaties?
What?
Why you
that was after the war began.
No.
Yes.
After war began. It was before that.
Minsk agreement was signed before the war began.
Of course. Before that. The war is about 2 years. It's still not 2 years old.
So you're talking about 2014. He's talking about last year.
Yeah, I know, but the war began in 2014.
Minsk was after that.
2014.
2014, yes. The war began in 2014.
When you occupied them?
Yes, and Donbass. There was a war in Donbass.
That's Russian land.
But it was a war. In Ukraine, you do
happen.
realize that
It
both
lasts only a
Donetsk
week.
and Luhansk, the two regions of Ukraine, of Donbass, both of them have voted overwhelmingly to be in Ukraine when the Ukraine left the Soviet Union. 80% plus, more than 80%. They voted to be with Ukraine. Overwhelming. Absolutely overwhelming.
They are Russian.
Buddy, they have voted to be with Ukraine.
No.
Yes. Yes, you need to do basic research. Go to Google, do some basic research, very basic stuff.
I hate this
He
man.
probably thinks the island
Yeah, you've been
of
talking
Madeira
to
is
him.
Russian too.
You write to him, for fuck's sake.
Well, Stalin here, he needs to inform himself. He's lived so long. You've lived so long, Stalin. You've lived through World War II and all that.
I'm going to buy you a drink, but don't drink this guy.
No, thank you.
I don't want to be there.
Number 10.
You want to come for drink?
No, thanks.
Sleazy shit asking you. I mean, first of all, even as apart from the fact he's an arsehole, you're out of his league by an immeasurable distance. I can't even give enough superlatives.
Where is
Let me take a look.